All right, the European parliamentary elections are a little over a week away now, and I want to give a quick update overview of Germany. It's been a few days since I've done a video on the channel, and the videos before that were mainly about the other EU countries, but I want to take a focus on Germany in this video to kind of see what the polls are showing, what the changes have been over the past few days and weeks, and what we can kind of expect going forward looking into this election. And if we take a look at the numbers, the results, we can see there's not been too many changes. There's not been too many shifts in the polls in any direction, but there has been one major recent development, and that is involving the AfD, and is that they have been kicked out of the Identity and Democracy Group. That is their European-wide political grouping, political party, and there were a number of scandals involving the lead candidate of the AfD, Maximilian Krah, and apparently for the other ID parties that basically became too much pressure. They didn't want the negativity surrounding the AfD to affect their parties, and there was also kind of a personal divide between Marine Le Pen of the French National Rally and Maximilian Krah. Back in the 2022 presidential elections, Krah supported Eric Zemmour over Marine Le Pen, and so there's somewhat of a personal divide, personal tension between them, and so it's likely that basically these scandals had kind of been the last straw for the other parties, and there was divide. The Freedom Party of Austria supported the AfD, or supported keeping them in the ID group, whereas Lega and the National Rally in France supported removing them from the group. Now, this is going to have somewhat of an effect on the AfD in terms of their position in the European Parliament, who they sit with. They are now a non-attached, a non-aligned grouping. This means that they do not sit with a European-wide political faction. They will sit as independents, but they will be AfD politicians. Now, this will have likely some effect on the result, but not too much. I mean, they are at around 16.7% in the polls. This is about in line what they were with, over the past several weeks and months. Now, they have dropped significantly in the polling aggregate on the national level due to a number of scandals and also the entrance of the BSV in the polling aggregate. They have dropped from around 22% to around 16-17%, lower in some polls down to around 15%. Some polls they're 17, maybe 18%, but this is around in line with what they've got recently. And the reasons for it is kind of disputed. Yes, the BSV has entered, definitely taking away a few results for them. There was also some scandals involving the two main candidates with their ties to Russia and China. There was big protests against the AfD back in February about their migration policy, and there has been a lot of pressure on the party, especially from their political rivals on the left, the SPD and Greens. But I want to take maybe a quick view of just the polls in general, and so we can see clearly that the CDU is far ahead of any other party. They had around 30% in the polling aggregate. This is a okay result for them. This is going to be the second worst result, but nonetheless, German politics has changed. This is for the times we have now with so many parties involved. This is nonetheless a good result. They are clearly winning, slightly getting more votes than what they got in the last EU elections in 2019, but they are clearly ahead. You're around 15 points of anyone who's in second place. Even if the AfD doesn't manage second place and the Greens or SPD are able to win 15-16%, the CDU will clearly be ahead in this election, or the CDU, CSU rather, the combined result for the two parties. Now, the AfD, if they are able to win second place, this will be a victory for them. It will be somewhat disappointing. They will not be able to win the 22-23% that they had hoped back in last summer when they had when they decided their candidates. So it would nonetheless be somewhat disappointing, but this happened. This happened to the Greens in the 2021 elections. The party was polling at around 22-23%, and in the end, they only got 15%. Now, it was their best result ever, but it was a lot lower than what they kind of initially expected in the months prior. And now, if the AfD is able to win second place here, this will be huge. This will be the most important factor of this election. If they are able to win the second place, that will be the first time ever that the AfD has managed to win nationwide second place. They will likely win all of East Germany, and this will be a huge, signal and significant milestone for the party. And of course, they will be kind of seen as a winner as well as the CDU. And if the results of the CDU, CSU, and the AfD together get around, a 50%, that is a clear signal that there is a kind of center-right majority in terms of the electorate in the country. Now, the results for the Greens and the SPD, the Greens at around 14.4% and the SPD at around 14%. This is really, up in the air. This is within both margin of error. There's different polls that have them ahead of each other. Now, this will be kind of a bittersweet victory for the Greens. I mean, they will be able to hold on to their 15% they got from the last general election, but this is a drop of around 5 points from the last EU elections. Now, It's very hard for political parties, especially ones outside the mainstream or ones that are not part of the two-party kind of system that you have in many countries, to hold on to the strong surge in support that they get from election to election. So this will be seen, despite their losses, this will be seen as a moderate result for them. And if they're able to beat the SPD, that is kind of important for them, maybe going forward in the future, to show that they can kind of maybe lead the new kind of left-wing progressive bloc. But of course, with both parties being so low, it's very unlikely rather, that either of these parties will be able to have the mandate to form a government in the future, especially at the next general elections. Now, the result for the SPD, this is, an abysmal result. This is lower than what they got at the last election. This is the party of Germany's chancellor. This is the oldest party here. They've been around for over 100 years, over 150 years, and they're a very experienced party. They've been in the government for many years throughout the past decades, and for them to be at only 14%, this is lower than any result they've gotten in the Federal Republic's history. This will be an underperformance of what they got in 2019, which was already a huge drop in support. This will not be a good result for them. Now, of course, they can manage third place, but even if they get third place at around 16%, that is still, not a great result for them. But this has kind of been expected. This is where the SPD was at from around 2018 to 2021. They were able to surge with Olaf Scholz in the federal election due to his, kind of popularity, or more rather his popularity over the other candidates of the Greens and the CDU-CSU. However, the SPD as a party is clearly struggling here. This is not where they want to be at. And if we take a look at the other parties, the BSV, the Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht, this is around 6.2%. This is lower than what they were polling at initially. However, this is a good result for them, because if they can get 6.2% here on the federal level, it means that likely, not certainly, but possibly, they can get over 5% at the next federal elections and enter into the Bundestag with some seats. Now, that is also important to take into account when you look at the FDP and Die Linke. They are both at around 3.5%. This is clearly below the 5% threshold that they need to enter the Bundestag. Now, of course, the results for the EU elections are not going to be the exact same as for the federal elections, and there's also, a year difference in between. But nonetheless, this is a bad signal for both these parties. If they're not able to win 5% here, it shows that they're going to have to do a lot of work to get above the threshold in a year's time. And even then, if the BSV is able to win, twice as much support as Die Linke, you could have more defections. You could have more politicians say, okay, if we're going to enter into the Bundestag again, we better leave Die Linke, join the BSV. I'm not saying it's going to be likely, but I think it's a possibility that there could be more defections within state legislatures or the Bundestag to the BSV after this election. We get kind of a feel of the strength of each of the parties. The FDP, 3.9%, they've been struggling for a while. There's kind of been a lot of infighting in the coalition between the different parties, especially the FDP and the Greens on energy policy, taxation, things like that. And so the FDP has kind of had to defend to their voters certain policies that they kind of didn't used to agree on or position on. Now, you do have some other parties in Germany, the Free Voters, the Animal Rights Party, Die Partei, that are all going to be able to win seats here, and this is because the EU elections does not have a threshold. Now, the polls for these parties are kind of fluctuate a lot. It's kind of hard to get a gauge of how many, what they're actually going to be at, but it's likely that there's going to be probably, at least 3 to 5, maybe upwards of 8 parties that are going to win at least 1, maybe 2 seats in the EU elections. And if we look at the last results, we can see this was the case. You had the main, 6 parties that were able to win seats, but you also had Die Partei, which is more of a kind of satirical party founded by 2 news magazine, journalist, and it's kind of, a center-left party, but it's mainly kind of a satirical party that's similar to the ones you have in the UK and some other countries. So they got 2.4%. They won 2 seats. The Free Voters that are popular in Bavaria, the kind of center-right conservative party, they got around 2% as well, winning 2 seats. The Animal Rights Party won 1 seat. The ODP, which is similar to the Greens, but more conservative on social issues, more conservative on economic issues. It's kind of a mix of the CDU and the Greens. They got 1 seat. The Family Party, which is, center-right conservative party, as the name would kind of describe, is got 1 seat. Volt and the Pirate Party, which are both center-left but very focused on specific issues. Of course, Volt focusing on the EU. They're a very pro-EU party, and the Pirate Party focusing on, internet, and they were popular around, the 2012 era. They both got around 1%. You need to get around 0.7%, 0.65 to win 1 seat, and it's likely that a lot of these parties will return winning 1 seat in the European Parliament. Germany has the most seats, and so it's very easy for a party, as long as they can get 1% of the vote, pretty much, they will be guaranteed a seat, and so it's likely many of these parties will return with 1 mandate, and then, of course, the major parties, the major top 6 or 7, will be the ones sharing the majority of the seats. Now, if we take a look at the results over time, we can see that the CDU, CSU, and the SPD have definitely dropped a lot from what they used to get. They used to be at least around 40-45% in the results, and they've clearly fallen below that. The SPD went from around, the 40s in the 70s and 80s, and or towards the 90s, and they've kind of dropped down to basically half of what they've got in the past. And so it is definitely a huge change in the German political scene. The two major parties that used to dominate politics are nowhere near as strong as they used to be, and there's been kind of increase in different parties. The Greens surged to 20%. The AfD has made an entrance in the political scene. We had Die Linke that came in the 90s, and now the BSV. And so a lot of new parties have taken part in these elections, and it's clearly shown that the German political scene has drastically changed, and there will be a lot more parties competing in these elections. And now, when you look at these results, of course, the CSU and CDU are counted separately here, but when you look at these results, the CDU will probably get in line with what they got in the last election, slightly ahead. But this is still, when you look at the historical trend, that's not a great result for them, taking all things into account. The same for the SPD. Even if they're able to win, 18, or even if they're able to win 20%, that is still going to be their second worst result. And the Greens, same thing. Even if they only win 14-15%, that is a drop, but that would be their second best result in the history of these EU elections. So that is important to take into account the historical context. But of course, things have changed. We can't expect the CDU, CSU, and SPD to be able to win the support in an environment now compared to one in the 70s or 80s when there was a lot less political parties active and on the scene. But when we take a look at these results, I mean, it's an interesting development, interesting picture. I mean, definitely it is most likely going to be a victory for the CDU, CSU. That is clearly certain pretty much here. And the AfD, if they can win second place, that will be a victory for them. The Greens and SPD, they will kind of be competing over the center-left vote. It will be probably a victory for one of them and a loss for the other. I mean, if the Greens are able to win 15%, they will be okay with that. I think the biggest, problem, the biggest loser of this election will be the SPD. I mean, the party of the German chancellor coming fourth place, even though it's not a general election, the fact that it is a nationwide election, it is a test. It is an electoral referendum somewhat on Scholz, and for his party to win fourth place would be a defeat for him. And I don't think this is going to cause any new elections, but it's possible. It's possible that maybe the FDP sees they're below 5%, and they say, okay, well, we might need to leave the current federal government and prepare our election campaign to hope that we can win over 5% of the vote for the next federal election. Because if they're at only 3.9% here and they stay in the current coalition that's very unpopular, that could be bad for them. They could doom themselves permanently. But I'm not saying that's likely. I'm not saying that it's it's certain or even a high chance that there's snap elections because of this. But it is possible that there's political pressure created by these results within the parties, to the parties in the Bundestag, to create, to cause one of them to leave the coalition, or kind of a reshuffling maybe. That could happen. It's not certain, but that is definitely a possibility. I don't want to, exclude that. But these results are pretty much going to be, I mean, this is pretty much going to be the polls for the election. We only have around 10 days now, and so the results I don't expect to change too much. I think this is probably going to be in line with what we actually get. I don't see, there might be more scandals in the next few days, but I don't think it's going to have too much of an effect. But of course, I will do some more videos when we get the results. I will probably do a video the night of, or the day after, just kind of giving a quick overview of Germany, and then I'll do some more deep dive into the way each of the states voted in Germany, what that means for the country in the future, and then of course following up each of the different EU countries. But I wanted to give kind of a just brief quick overview of Germany, because this is kind of the focus of the channel, and we haven't talked about them in a while. So this is gonna kind of give a view. This is not, of course, certain. These are only polls, but I want to give you guys this video to kind of show what we can expect for the EU elections going forward. But of course, I will cover the actual results, and that will be definitely an exciting, very important election. So I hope you all liked and enjoyed this video, and if you do, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.